Hey guys, welcome back to SUP'S Garage. Today I'm going to be working on a 2010 KTM 990 adventure bike. To show you the issues we're having on this one, as we turn the key, turn on the run button, and the gauge isn't working. So on this video, I'm going to show you how to remove the speedometer and repair it to get the display showing all the numbers again. So the first thing we got to do is take the plastics on the front off to be able to remove the speedometer. I'm going to go ahead and start off with the shield. We've got a total of 5 bolts that I'm going to have to remove. You got 2 on the left side, 2 on the right side, and 1 in the center. And you're going to need a Torx bit to remove all these bolts. So let me go ahead and remove that real quick. All right, got the shield out of the way. Next I'll be removing is also 2 more bolts in the inside of the fairings. You got 1 there, 1 in the back. If we look at the other side, same thing, 1 there, 1 in the back. Then I'm gonna move on to the front, and you can see a bolt tucked in there in the corner. Also in the other corner as well. 2 more bolts, 1 here and 1 here on each side in order to get these side pieces off. Okay, so once you get all those bolts out of the way, just slowly pull off the plastic and it comes right off. And you're gonna do the exact same thing on the other side. After we get those 2 side pieces removed, now we have access to more bolts we gotta remove. 1 on the bottom, 1 in the center, this one on the very back. 1 on the right side. You're gonna do the exact same thing on the other side to be able to get this front piece off. All right, so once you get all 8 of those bolts removed from this cover, you can simply just pull it and it comes right off. And now we have full access to the speedometer, which is held down by another 3 bolts and also the wiring harness. Gonna go ahead and pull back on this plastic to get access to the connection. And I'm not sure if you can see very well, but there's a tab on top. You're gonna push down on that tab and pull the clip out. Now we're simply just gonna remove these 3 bolts. Once you get those 3 bolts removed, then we can just simply wiggle the speedometer out. And there we have it. We got the speedometer fully off the bike, and now we're gonna open this up. All right, moving on to the next part. We're gonna need a Phillips screwdriver to remove 4 screws, 1, 2, 3, and 4, before we can open up the speedometer. Okay, so once we got those 4 screws removed, we can go ahead and open it like so. Next part we gotta do is remove this needle. Be very careful with it, just pull up gently. Now we gotta lift up this cover here very slowly. Then you are gonna have adhesive glue on this side here. Be very patient when you're doing this part. I'll be using a flathead screwdriver to slowly go underneath there and slowly pry up on it. And it'll eventually pop off just like you saw. Next part is you want to carefully put this somewhere where this sticky part will not touch anything. Because if this part touches anything, chances are you're not going to be able to get it off because this is really sticky. Okay, on this next part, we got 2 screws that we got to remove. 1 there and 1 in the corner there. Okay, once you get those 2 screws off, now we can remove this cover. And now we have full access to the chip. Now apparently on these KTMs it's really common that some of the soldering points go bad. One is going to be this area here, which mine looks pretty fine. I don't see nothing wrong with it. And the other one is usually way down here on this little piece here. But mine looks fine. In my case, the only thing wrong with mine that the screen is loose. So it looks like it's not getting full contact on these pins. Somehow, some way this popped off, probably due to a bumpy ride, because these bikes are known to go off-road. So what I'm gonna do is simply just snap this back in, and I'm gonna see if the numbers display. Okay, so when connecting the speedometer back onto the bike, just to test it, just be very careful that the back of the speedometer doesn't touch anything metal. Luckily for us, everything in front is pretty much plastic, but just take precautions just in case. You don't want to damage any of the electrical stuff on it. Okay, so I didn't end up putting this part on the camera, and it probably really wasn't necessary, but I did this just to be on the safe side. What I ended up doing was removing the factory glue with the razor blade to be able to get the screen completely off. If you decide to do this, just be very careful when you're using that razor blade because you don't want to damage any of the pins. Once I got the glue off, then I used a very small flathead screwdriver on both sides of the screen to pry up very slowly to get the screen off. You definitely don't want to put too much pressure when you're prying up because you don't want to damage the bottom part of the screen. Not to mention that it's also made out of glass. You're honestly better off probably using some type of plastic instead of something metal to pry it up. Once I had the screen completely off, all I did was slightly bend all those pins downward to be 100% sure that it will be making full contact after I put the screen back in. Once you've done this, just simply put the screen back in the slot. Make sure that it's pushed all the way down to get full contact, and just simply use a glue gun to re-glue the area, which I'm about to show you here. So I already got the LCD back in place with those little contacts slightly bent. Don't mind the paper towel, I just put that in the way for the headlight won't glare against the camera. We're gonna go ahead and turn our key. And there we have it. We have our LCD screen back and working like it should. You want to go ahead and tap on that screen just to be sure that it doesn't do it again. Because obviously if it's all back put together and you're on a bumpy road, well, you don't want this coming loose again. Next thing we got to do is glue this back together to make sure that it's solid. All right, so I wasn't able to continue recording because the camera ended up falling while I was gluing, and I didn't want to take a chance of messing this up fixing the camera. But as you can see, there's a lot more glue than what the manufacturer puts on these things. And I went on and added some glue on the tabs, and you can't really see very well, but I also added glue on each of these tabs as well for this LCD screen. Can't move at all at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and put all this back together, connect it back on the bike, and see what it looks like then. When you use the glue gun, be sure you don't put any glue on this screen, because that glue dries up pretty quick, and you don't want to mess up your LCD screen, because it's going to be really hard to get that glue off without scratching the screen. Now before you put this piece all the way in, go ahead and put this screw in, because you're not going to be able to put the screw in while the main piece is already in the housing. Got our 2 screws in. Now we're going to have to put the sticky cover back on. Be very careful that you don't get that stuck to anything. Take your time on this part. Once you have it in the right place, go ahead and push down on it. Not too hard, just enough to stick it back onto the cover. Okay, make sure you put the needle on back correctly, and it's gonna aim straight down, so make sure you put that on right. Once you connect it back to the bike, it should readjust on its own. Now we're gonna put the top cover back on, but while you're at it, you might as well clean the inside of this to make it as clean as possible. Simply just turn it over, and let's put the 4 screws that hold the cover on. And now we're gonna put the piece back on the bike. Okay, so I got the speedometer back on, but I'm gonna go ahead and double check it while I still got all the front cover off, just to be safe. And there we have it. We got everything displaying at this point. You could even tap on it just to play it safe to make sure that it's touching correctly. And it looks like this was the fix. And I'm gonna go ahead and crank it on just to make sure that the needle was put in properly. Once you shut it off and you hit the red button again, it should adjust the needle at that point. All right, so at this point, we're just gonna reverse all the steps we did in the beginning. And I'm gonna start off with the harness. And all you have to do is snap the connector right back in, then put this rubber piece back on, and just make sure this rubber cover's all the way pushed in. Now moving down to the 3 bolts that actually hold down the speedometer. Okay, so once you got those 3 bolts on, which by the way, don't forget that all 3 of these bolts came with washers on them. Now we can start putting the face back on. We're just gonna slip it in first. Be sure that on each side, where it has this piece here for the bolt to screw onto, goes behind this plastic piece here, like so, for both sides. Now we can put on those 8 bolts that we removed earlier. Remember, there's gonna be 6 that go in the front here, 3 on each side, and then we have 2 more on the back. All right, so now we're moving on to the sides once you get the face on. I'm gonna start on my left side, but it really doesn't matter what side you pick first. And I find it the easiest if you start off on the back side to slide in this groove here. So I'm simply just gonna slide the back in, like so, and it goes in pretty easy, so you shouldn't have to force it. And in the front, you're gonna have a little bit of gap. You just gotta make sure that this metal clip for the screw goes behind this plastic here. Push slowly. You gotta make sure that the bottom metal clip for the screw goes underneath this piece here. Now for this piece, remember we have 2 bolts to put in, 2 in the back, 1 in the very corner here, and then the very bottom here. And once you're done with that side, go ahead and do the exact same thing on the other side. Okay, so I got both left and right side covers already back on. Last thing I gotta do is put that shield back on, which is held down by 5 bolts. And remember, you do not have to remove the shield in the very beginning. I just did that just to be safe, but it's definitely not necessary if you're doing it just to get to that speedometer. All right, so now she's officially back in one piece. So now let's double check that speedometer. We're gonna hop on the bike here. We're gonna go ahead and turn it on to see if everything works. Don't mind that noise. I actually installed an LED light. As you can see, the headlights are a lot brighter. But as you can see, all the numbers display, and I'm gonna turn it on just to make sure everything works. And there you have it. This bike is good to go. So that's gonna put a wrap to this video, guys. Like always, I'm really hoping that this helps a lot of people out there. And feel free to comment if you have any tips or any faster way of doing this to share with everybody else. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. If you enjoy watching videos like this, don't forget to hit the like button for me to show your support. And like always, don't forget, God loves every single one of y'all, and God bless all of y'all, and we'll see you on the next video.